to our first stage of homeownership, which is where people are deciding that homeownership is for them, right? So let's continue to think about those patterns and the roles that you've already brought up. But starting with outreach and trust, where does outreach reach people well, and where does it miss them?
Trust is really hard to gain when you talk about home ownership. And that's because, most people just, they go through life and they have issues. So it's not easy to gain trust. I see it with mine, and I know the winter season on there. And with outreach, I think that we need to factor in everyone's situation. So what I mean by that is you have folks that are very, everything is digital today, so electronic and all that. But unfortunately, there are communities, people that are not on that level. They're just not there yet. So, we still need to find ways to connect with them and help them to be able to become a homeowner, especially even seniors. There are many seniors that I deal with that, when you talk about outreach and build a trust with them, and if you want to force them to use technology, they're just not there to be able to do it. So we need to continue to reach out to people and touch them in every way and not just leave them, on the side, try to force everyone, to do the same.
I thought it was a harmony with that, social media, of course, is a good outreach, but sometimes the business about for some of our others, folks who are not technology, savvy or just not into it. The grandchildren may be helping them, so there are some ways to do that. So with housing counseling and our community organizations, the door-to-door, door knocking, right, the old school, really reaching out and trying to reach them in the community. We've been trying to do that just to reestablish that trust. I heard Ms. Sonia say sometimes we don't even know as community residents what's being offered and what's out there. So bridging that gap with the communication and really our community meetings, or again, going door-to-door, meeting them maybe at the barbershop, wherever they are, so that you could reach them and educate them on what's available.
For me, seeing outreach, there is not enough outreach in the community. I'm the president of my community association, and knowledge does not come to me. Our neighborhoods are very active, in our community associations, and it seems to be that the city will bring information after they've created a plan. So you're only coming to share with us your vision or your plan. And so the community, there's a lack of trust because we've been made promises, things that we've asked for never came, and so it's a struggle as a community leader to even get community members engaged because they feel like nobody cares, they're going to do what they want to do anyway. And so when I bring these issues to whoever it is that's bringing development or how we're going to rebuild our neighborhoods, it's always a thing of when I say I need more engagement with you all. It's like, oh, there's a cost, how much flyers cost, but we have to assume that cost, when we go out, going back to the grassroots, like you indicated, door knocking. Then it's a problem. They don't have enough staff. It's all these excuses that we continually hear within our neighborhoods. But yet, when they're ready to move forward, you're moving forward without us. Our voices aren't heard. We're not feeling as though we're being respected. As if we don't matter here anymore. And so this is where I see outreach is necessary, and the only way that I can see that you're going to be able to build the trust, people need to see it. You need to come into the neighborhood. They want to be heard and understand that I live here, I chose to live here, I choose to remain here. And if you're going to do anything here in my community, I want to be able to have the opportunity to talk with you.
Before we keep going on this issue of trust, which I'm seeing, we're on a roll, who is being missed? Seniors, I heard,
people who are vested in the community, you know, are the ones who really need the help. You know, and because, I mean, they have children now who are grown, you know, or grandchildren who are grown. And there are plenty of vacant houses in our neighborhood. You know, people who want to remain in their community. You know, but there's no opportunities for us to bring people in, you know, and let them know, I want to purchase, I would like to live here, I would like to purchase this home. You know, I want to live near my aging parent. You know, and so these are some of the people who I see, you know, who needs to be, and it seems to me that a lot of the focus are not on the residents who live there. It's more, or the owners who are really vested. It's more of talking to the renters, but not giving the renters the information to be able to be a homeowner. And so they put us against the odds of one another. You know, and the renters feel as though, you know, we don't care about them because they don't get renters here, you know, but we want them to know that you're a part of our community. You know, and anything that comes here is for the benefit of all of us. But when you don't feel as though you are included in that process, you know, then you don't get them at the table. You know, so on the outside you hear more opposition, you know, than you feel both here the unity.
Thank you for lifting up homeowners as a missed opportunity to leverage them as the anchors in their neighborhoods. They are. So I'm going to keep going on that idea of trust. His family,
Yes.
maybe thoughts?
So trust is basically our actions also. So we want to build that relationship on our actions and then let them know that we are committed. And we have to stick to that trust and commitment to let them know. So being committed and involving your actions and letting them know, you know, that we're sticking to this, then I think that will help develop the trust. As far as outreach, with the outreach process, we want to stay involved. You know, all kinds of ways we can stay involved. And we usually assume that, I see the problem where we usually assume that everyone processes the same information the same way. And that's not good. Everyone's on different levels and different perspectives on how they receive the information. So we have to make it clear and understand different levels with different people, just like the different characters of the person. So how we receive and process the information is not all distributed the same way. So we have to stay on accord and try to understand with those persons to process that information in the correct way and make sure that they understand.
And I just want to ground this in where we are in the journey, right? So we're in this first stage before people have decided homeownership is for them. Where's the opportunity for alignment between your goals here around trust?
Because I was thinking, with Ms. Sullivan mentioned that we could get in early as housing counselors, right? So maybe not once they even think about buying a home, but what if we're talking to them earlier, reaching them at the community meeting, like you mentioned, a summer camp or a financial course with the children, but now we also have the parents and the grandparents that are now hearing these ideas about home ownership and renting. And so finding ways maybe to get connected with them early in the process and start to let them know what's available and what goals, you know, they can reach when it comes to housing, whether it's renter or home ownership.
I think it has to be consistent. You know, we have to consistently, you know, reach out and be there. You know, you can't just go in the community once and say, hey, would you like to purchase a home? Let me show you how to do this. You have to consistently be there and helping them during the time frame. And that's how you build trust. It takes time to build trust. It doesn't happen overnight, you know, and that's what folks are looking for. When they see you come in the community once, you know, then you leave, they don't take you serious. You know, you really want to have an impact, you need to have a schedule and be there for them, you know, and show them and then get them more involved. And then eventually, you know, they'll start believing that you really have their best interests at heart and you really want to help them become home.
Say something else. Also, a lot of to me, and, I'll explain the process of pre-approval and things like that. But one thing that arises with the confidence is, I said, I'll hold your hand through every step of the way. And that relaxes them and makes them understand, okay, no matter what, you can ask me anything if you don't understand, no questions dumb, but I will hold your hand through the whole process.
Sonia, you spoke to me about not wanting to assume that people are interested in homeownership, that they understand the value of that. Can you say a little bit about that?
Yeah, and talking to some of my neighbors and some of the young people, I've learned that, because we seem to be in Baltimore City, the whole thing now is ownership, home ownership. And I look back to my past, and I really thought that people owned their homes, and then, they lived there for decades, and so that house was even passed down to the next generation, but they didn't own it, and so talking to some of the younger people, and people are not wanting to be homeowners because they don't want that responsibility. They looking at, I don't want to cut no grass. I don't want to make this. Let the landlord take care of that. If something breaks, I don't have to fix it. I'm not a handyman. Don't have the finances, for the repairs. So they're not interested in becoming a homeowner. I think that's something that should be and needs to be addressed. And I know we're going to come back to it further down the road, but I'm hoping that, as a part of the process from the banks, that we look at, you're purchasing this house now. You have a 30-year mortgage, over 30 years' time, there's going to be some situations in the house. And the bank should take, more of a look in knowing this is a reality. Things can break, things need to be updated, to keep the value of the property. And I think being able to assure people that, if they're paying their mortgages, that there should be some type of a loan, something that can come back to them, when that need comes, where you won't have those foreclosures. People wouldn't have to walk away, from that. So I just think that there are some things, some type of initiatives that should be given. This way you assure people, I can take that road of home ownership. It's way cheaper than paying the rent, so.
Thank you. Before we move on to the next stage, I just want to name some themes that I heard. Right, I heard that we have to take a step back before we think about the transaction, right? And put ourselves in the minds of the folks that are being left out of that conversation of homeownership. And then I also heard that, there are folks that are on the ground, housing counselors, community associations, and that partnerships with the different roles in the space can be a critical way to reach them.